Hello everyone, my name's Chris and I'm here today in Haverford, Pennsylvania with the Growing Greener Communities Initiative and Hav-A-Rain Garden program. Today I'm going to be walking you through the steps of how to build your own rain garden. Let's dive in. A rain garden is a bowl-shaped garden designed to capture and absorb stormwater. During a rainstorm, water is channeled into the garden from hard surfaces like roofs and driveways. This water pools temporarily, filtering through plants and other organic material and slowly soaking into the ground. Rain gardens come in various shapes and sizes, which makes them adaptable to most properties. Rain gardens have many benefits. First, they can help protect our creeks, streams, and rivers from pollution and degradation. Rain gardens help prevent stormwater runoff from entering our storm sewer systems, which often drain directly into our streams. This can prevent harmful pollutants from entering our waterways, while protecting communities downstream from dangerous floods. In addition, rain gardens create important wildlife habitat where once was a suburban lawn. With the aid of native plants, these gardens can provide food and shelter for a variety of birds, butterflies, insects, and pollinators. Since about 1/3 of our food crops require pollination to produce, it is essential now more than ever to support them. Are you ready to learn how to build a rain garden? Let's dive in. The first step in designing your own rain garden is assessing your property. During this assessment, we'll determine the best location for a rain garden by taking note of various factors in your yard. For this process, you'll need a pencil and paper, calculator, 100-foot tape measure, shovel or post hole digger, 4-foot I-beam level, a few jugs of water, and a 12 or 13-inch ruler. To access worksheets to help you with this process, visit growinggreenercommunities.org.
Can you remind me of some of the different tests and measurements we did the other day?
A homeowner had to request an assessment, and once they did, a group of us, sometimes 1, 2, or 3, will come out. We'll measure the roof areas, and we'll measure driveway, sidewalk, try to figure out where water is running off.
Okay.
35.
35, so it's
Step 1 is to make a sketch of your property. This sketch will include the different sections of your roof, placement of your downspouts and where they drain to, impervious areas like sidewalks and driveways, location of trees and other plantings, and lawn area. During this process, take note of your roof area and which downspouts the different sections drain to. Once you have a basic sketch of the property down, it's time to take some measurements. Using your tape measure, record the length and width in feet of the various sections of your roof and other impervious surfaces. Once you have these various measurements, you'll need to calculate the square footage of each area. You can do this by multiplying length times width. Note these calculations on your property sketch, as they will help you figure out the drainage area of your garden. A drainage area is the area of impervious surface which your rain garden receives water from. Now we can do some tests to determine whether or not we can build a rain garden here.
One of the first that we did was a percolation test. That percolation test is achieved by taking a post hole digger, going down 13 or 14 inches, removing that soil, dropping a ruler into that hole, and then putting water in that hole. We want to see how quickly water will percolate down through the particular soil that is here. In many cases, it goes down readily, and we don't have a problem with that.
Right.
But sometimes there are layers of clay which will cause a problem.
Next, you'll need to check the progress of your infiltration every few hours until the hole drains completely. During checkups, record the time and number of inches the water is currently at. If your hole drains in less than 24 hours, your soil is ideal for a rain garden. After conducting your infiltration test, we'll need to measure the slope of your potential site. Starting uphill, place your level on the ground facing downhill. Move the downhill end of your level until it is level, keeping the uphill end on the ground. Then measure the height between the downhill end and the ground. Now move the level downhill, placing it to continue where the downhill end left off, and repeat. Continue this across the entire rain garden area. Now add up the total height you recorded in inches and divide it by the length in inches of the total area you measured. Then multiply by 100 to get the slope in percentage. If your slope is greater than 8%, you'll likely need to build your rain garden in tiers.
We see a lot of clay. What we'll do is just a soil test. We'll take some of the soil and we'll add some water to it, and we'll roll it in our hands, much like you would a Tootsie Roll. And we want to see how much it sticks together If it sticks together too much, that tells us the water is not going to get through that soil very readily. But most of what we encounter has a mix. So we might say it's a little more loamy. It's got some clay, but it's got some silt. It's got a mix of sometimes sand and other materials. And as long as it has that mix, we can get water to infiltrate through or percolate through.
Are there any rules of thumb that people should remember when trying to place their rain garden in the right spot?
Well, there are a bunch of them. One is we try not to get too close to a house, especially if it has a cellar. That water pressure that goes in the ground, when we put lots of water in the ground, it can push back towards that cellar space and create some hydrostatic pressure on that basement. So we try not to be within 10 feet of a house. We try not to be over any pipes. So we want to make sure that 811 gets called to make sure that there are no gas pipes, no water pipes, sewer lines, whatever happens to be in that area. We look for electric lines, not just overhead lines. Sometimes power lines come in underground. Then there are also sometimes smaller lines. Let's say there's an outdoor light for a walkway. We have to make sure that no underground lines are going to be in the way.
Can you build a rain garden like near any trees, or is that a no-go?
Well, you can. It depends. We try to use what's called the drip line of a tree. So a tree might be 15 or 20 years old and have a radius of branches that come out 15 feet from a trunk. So we try to come to the outside edge of those branches if we can. There are other considerations as well.
How do you tell how big to make a rain garden?
Well, that is completely dependent upon the amount of runoff area that you have. So we'll come out with tape measures and we'll measure the roof. We'll sketch out what the various areas are, where the water comes down, which downspout. And if we can take water from a certain downspout, calculate what that runoff area is, bring all that area out to a certain place where we can put a rain garden, then we usually say about 1/3 of the amount of runoff area is the area that we can make a rain garden. So for instance, let's say that we measured a roof and it seemed to be 30 feet by 10 feet. We collect all of that water. 10 times 30 is 300 square feet. We can make a rain garden about 1/3 that area, which would be about 100 square feet. 10 by 10, 5 by 20. We can change that shape any way we wish. Make it into a kidney bean shape, anything we want. Doesn't have to be a rectangle like it appears on my graph paper.
Gardens with sandy or silty soils are generally made deeper, as they are able to infiltrate water more quickly. Gardens with clay soils, which have a slower infiltration rate, are generally made more shallow. For more specific information on these calculations, please check out the rain garden guides on growinggreenercommunities.org.
Can you tell us a little bit about the design process for the rain gardens, Stephen?
Sure. We try to incorporate the wishes of the homeowner. You know, what's going to be something that's visually attractive to them? Do they want it to be seen by their neighbors going by, or is it just something for them? So we try to incorporate that. The shape is important. How far away from the house, how close to sidewalks, driveways, etc. We also want to see if they're interested in a certain kind of plant. Are they interested in certain colors? Are they interested in something that's going to be visually appealing during the winter when most of this has died back?
This is the design we created for the garden we're installing today. Note how we labeled each area with the kind of species we'd like to plant there. Some factors to consider when selecting plants for your garden include seasonal bloom time, texture, color, height, sun preference, and winter interest. For more information on the rain garden design process, as well as resources on selecting and acquiring native plants, please visit growinggreenercommunities.org. Materials that you'll need for the installation process include native plants, mulch, 2 to 6 inch pond pebbles, and downspout extension piping if needed. Tools you will need include a shovel, marking spray, stakes, or an old hose, a rear tine tiller, string, a line level, a rake, and a trowel or drill fitted with a 2-inch auger. Tools can be found at your local tool library, and if necessary, front tine tillers can be rented from Home Depot or Lowe's. The first step in this process is marking out the shape of your garden. To do this, you can use marking spray paint, an old hose, or stakes and strings. Be sure to check that the dimensions of the shape that you draw match with those you planned for in your design. If your rain garden ends up being slightly bigger or smaller than what you planned for, that's completely fine. After drawing out the shape of your garden, it's time to remove the sod from your lawn. To do this, we used a manual kick-type sod cutter. Other options for sod removal include renting a sod cutting machine from your local hardware store or sheet mulching. After removing the sod from your rain garden, you'll need to redirect stormwater to the garden from your impervious surfaces. Most often, we'll accomplish this by extending the downspouts either underground or above ground.
What we do, we'll attach a pipe to a downspout and run it out to an area.
Okay.
We can, if it's going to be a large amount of volume and the pitch of this pipe is great, we'll try and turn up with an elbow, try and turn up that water so it slows down. We can put a pop-up on the top. That's sort of in the extreme cases. In other cases, we can just have a pipe run out to an area where we'll have a field of stone. That stone can slow down that water before it comes in. If you don't put that stone in there, you're likely just to wash out all the plants that you have put in the ground. It take a lot of effort to do this, and this has happened to us. And so we've been trying to learn from our mistakes. We have to slow that water down so that it can spread out in this area as best as it can.
Other methods of redirecting stormwater include using the natural slope of an impervious surface adjacent to your garden or creating a swale. Take your shovel and begin digging out your rain garden to a depth of 3 to 6 inches. A rain garden's depth is measured from the top of your rain garden edge or berm to the bottom of the basin. As you remove soil from the garden bed, you can begin to build up your berm.
So the idea is that we want to create a space which is somewhat level at the bottom of the rain garden. And we want to trap the water. If we can trap that water, hold it for a while, then we're doing our job. But in order to trap it, what we have to do is we have to build a little crest along the outside of that rain garden. We call it a berm. And the idea is to hold that water for a certain amount of time. That berm has to be compacted a little bit. We actually have a thing called a berm walk. We scoot along trying to pack that soil down to hold that water in there. If you don't, it will penetrate too quickly. So if you usually do this on 3 sides, the upper side usually does not have to have a berm on it, but in some cases it might. So we'll, much like a horseshoe would sort of trap something in it, like the good luck.
Hope so.
We try to trap in the water, the storm water, and hold it there.
To determine how high you'll need to build the berm, place a stake at the inlet or top of your rain garden and tie a piece of twine around it touching the ground. Next, slide your line level onto the string. Now place a stake at the downhill edge of your rain garden and tie a twine around it, making it taut. Move the string so that the line is level. Take note of the height. This is the height that your berm will need to be.
Then have particularly good plants that are good at soaking up water. Soak that water up, and then they can do something called transpiration. You ever heard that term? The idea that water can be taken up into a plant, and that water can go out through the leaves and back up into the atmosphere. Then that will not cause a problem for the storm sewer system. But this water coming in here might be so much that it fills this up and would spill over. So we hope to create a little channel here on the very top of this berm to bring it down into here. And then there'll be additional plants in this area to do the same kind of thing. We're trying to get this down to about 2 inches. If we then put stone in here and spill the stone down here, then we won't have erosion. So as this builds up like a bathtub, gets to a certain point, we don't have a bottom drain, we have this top over drain. So it spills over here, but this could be a push which causes a lot of damage. So if this water comes over here too quickly, it could wash out stuff. So we want to put stone in here, and that stone down here especially is important because as the water falls rapidly, The stone helps displace that force and spreads out the water, maybe not evenly, but it spreads it out so that the plants don't get washed away.
Does that look like enough stones, Stephen?
Never enough stone. And then when you put this in, we can walk on the stone just to try and keep the stone from also washing down. Does that make sense? We're going to bring in a device called a tiller. In some cases, you'll bring in something larger, let's say a backhoe. The idea is to dig down and to soften the soil. Many times a landscape has been compacted over the years. Okay. People walking on it, heavy equipment going across it. So we want to make sure we dig up this area, soften it, make sure that it is leveled in the bottom where we're going to plant, berm up an area, sort of a catchment, if you will, to catch the water that's in there.
Right.
And then if that soil in there has been loosened, then it's much easier later in the process to go and put plants in.
After you've taken the tiller through the garden, measure the levelness of the base. At first, one side of the garden will likely be slightly higher than the other. If this is the case, that means you'll need to rake soil to the lower side of the garden until the entire base is level. This will likely take several iterations of raking and tilling. After you've finished leveling the rain garden, it's time to build your outlet. This area is slightly lower than the rest of the edge or berm so that the water overflows in a controlled manner. This outlet should be placed in a location where runoff will not be a nuisance and ideally into a permeable surface like lawn. To build the outlet, remove a few inches of soil from a portion of the berm or edge and place pond pebbles in the depression. The stones will help slow down the water as it exits your garden. Once you've built your outlet, it's time to cover the garden in mulch. Mulch is an important part of the rain garden as it helps the ground to maintain its moisture, which will help your plants survive in the early stages of their life. Apply a few inches of undyed mulch to your garden, making sure not to pile it on too thick.
So this is the rain garden plan for today. We have the two gardens here. We have the circular shaped one, which we're seeing right in front of us, and then we have the longer swale shaped one. So you see we're putting out all the different types of native plants right now, and each of those have different water requirements and preferences. So we place them in different areas of the rain garden. Some of them are put in the lower basin, which gets wetter, and some of them are put on the higher berms and slopes, which prefer it drier. So we just make a plan like this so we know how many different plugs to put out.
Before planting, we often mark out the areas for each plant species with marking spray paint. Remove your plants from their containers and place them in their designated areas according to your design. Spacing is dependent on whether or not you'll be planting plugs or potted plants. Be sure to follow guidance from your nursery on plant spacing. Make sure to loosen up the roots of the plants before placing them in the ground. Since we use landscaping plugs in our gardens, we use a portable drill fitted with a 2-inch auger to make holes in the ground.
And then when we go to do the planting, we ask the people doing the planting just to move the mulch a little bit to the side and then drill in the dirt. No sense in drilling through the mulch. Just move it over 2 inches just to make a hole. And the auger is a 2-inch bit, so it'll go right in that spot. And then move over. The next person comes in to do the planting, and they just push the mulch right back on top.
If you are using smaller plugs or potted plants, a regular trowel or planting knife will be more than useful.
Doesn't matter what kind of plants we put in a rain garden?
Oh, it does. Not just to us, but to the homeowner as well.
Yeah.
The homeowners want something that's attractive to them. They may not be as cognizant of the other values of each of these plants, but these plants are designed much differently than grass is to penetrate very deeply with their roots. These plants will go down 8, 12, as much as 16 inches in many cases and create little fissures so that water will penetrate down and recharge the ground. So you recharge groundwater. Many times when we dig something up, what we find is that down as low as 2 or 3 inches, the soil is completely dry. Grass will absorb a little bit of water and shed all the rest of it. And it goes into the storm sewer system.
Yeah.
These plants are completely different. By penetrating deep with their roots, they will make sure that there are fissures for water to go down. These are native to the area, and the great advantage of them is they have been pretty much adapted to what has occurred in this environment. So their survivability rate is much greater than some others. And they're not likely to cause a problem for their neighbors. Their neighbors also have adjusted to them in many cases. So native plants are what we try to plant. Some homeowners, even though they've lived here all their lives, are not as familiar with them. We try to familiarize them with them as best as we can, whenever we can.
Congratulations, you've completed your rain garden. Rain garden plants take about 1 or 2 years to become fully established, but once they do, you'll have flowers and foliage of various shades and colors throughout the entire growing season. Throughout the life of your rain garden, and especially within the first few years, regular maintenance is required. During the first and second summer, it's best to water twice a week during dry conditions. Beginning in the 3rd year and beyond, rain garden plants will only need to be watered during drought conditions. In general, it's best to water more deeply rather than more often. Regularly weeding your garden is also very important. Weeds and invasive plants can overtake young native plants if left to their own devices. During the first few rainstorms after installation, observe the garden to make sure that the water is ponding properly. Finally, consider adding a sign to educate your neighbors on your rain garden.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you want to access more resources about rain gardens and other types of green stormwater infrastructure, you can go to growinggreenercommunities.org. See you later.
Growing Greener Communities is an initiative to create healthy waterways, improve quality of life, and limit climate change impacts in our communities. We plant trees, build rain gardens, replace pavement with green spaces, and convert lawns to wildlife habitat. Growing Greener Communities is a partnership between the Darby Creek Valley Association, Eastern Delaware County Stormwater Collaborative, Lower Merion Conservancy, and the Pennsylvania Resources Council.